Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd, and you are right now, this very moment, attending the December 2012 virtual user group meeting for Tabs3 and PracticeMaster users that we like to affectionately call the water cooler. And this month's topic is one of my favorite topics. I think it's one of Mary Jo's favorites too. It is our top 10 list of tips from PracticeMaster and Tabs in the accounting software, and we had so much fun this morning trying to come up with 10 items that we actually came up with 16, and we decided that that signified that we are now in version 16. So we have the top 16 tips for PracticeMaster Tabs in the accounting software for version 16.2 of Tabs3 PracticeMaster in the accounting software. So very quickly, I'm going to do the housekeeping thing where we pull this up and we say that your screen should have something probably that looks a little bit like this, or it might not, but that would mean you know how to do what I'm about to show you how to do. This is your GoToWebinar control panel. If you want to get it out of the way so that you can see what's behind it, you click this little button that looks like a arrow pointing to the right, and that will slide this big control panel out of the way. Once you do that, this little button that looks like an arrow pointing to the right will magically change into a little button that looks like an arrow pointing to the left. And that means that if you click it when it's in that state, it will slide this control panel back into view. So to summarize, when it's pointing to the right, it slides the control panel out of the way, and when it's pointing to the left, that means the control panel is already out of the way, and that means you want it back. And why would you possibly want it back? Because you're shy. And you don't want to raise your hand, more on that in a second, and instead you want to type a question for Leanne, our lovely moderator, to then present to me and Mary Jo to answer for you. So if you're shy, type a question here and we will answer your question. And if you're not shy, raise your hand by clicking this little button that looks like a hand with an arrow pointing upwards, meaning raising your hand. And that will mean that Leanne will know that that's something that you'd like to do, ask a question. She will at some point unmute you, let you ask your question, make sure you get it answered, and then she'll mute you back up so you can go back eating lunch. And so without further ado, I'm going to slide this over here, I'm going to click this here, and I am going to turn it over to Mary Jo, who is going to give us our first tip for the day.
Hello, everybody. I am going to talk to you about Client Manager. That is one of our #1 places that we like to tell clients about our customers so that they can get through their billing. They can make changes and modifications all quickly without having to go to the client, the fee, the cost, the payment tab. Everything is all under Client Managers, and I still have customers that do not know about this. So we thought this would be a great tip. Client Manager, if you click on it, again, you can search just like you do out with the client by last name, first name, however you want to do that. Or if you know the number, you can type it in. In this case, I'm going to go to our friend Michael Larson and say OK. And now I can see everything for Michael Larson at a glance. I can see his name and address. I can see his contact information. I can see who's primary, secondary, originating. I can see when, if he had anything, when his last statement had went out and when his last payment came in. I can also see what his AR balance was, if he had one. I can see the fee WIP, the cost WIP, payments, client funds, if you're using that, all at a glance. If a customer calls in and they want to know how much they owe on their bill, I could go right here and I could tell them very quickly. I don't have to click through any screens. I don't have to go try to find anything. It's right here in Client Manager. Also, if you need to make modifications to anything, if you're the billing person and you have that stack of pre-bills that you need to go through and you have all these fees to correct or any of that, you can come in here and I can see I have all this fee WIP here. These are actual buttons that you can click on to get more information. So I can click on fee WIP and I can see all of those transactions, including the reference numbers. So if you go by those, I can go right to reference number 11, click on it, say OK, and I can go, it takes me right out to the fee window so I can make my modifications. If I have any others for that particular client, they're down here, so I can change those. Everything right here, and then all of these different little icons down at the bottom here are customizable. So if I hit Customize and click on one, I can change it to something else. So if you use other things more frequently than what's already out of the box, you can add them. And lastly, if you have to go in to see the additional client information, you have to add a beginning statement note or beginning ending note or a courtesy discount or change the address, you can click on the link and it takes you right into that client window that you need to do those things to. So that is Client Manager in a very quick nutshell, but if you want more information on that, let me know. This is a billing person's especially godsend, and other than that, you know, you still can find information quickly. Paul?
Well, I'm going to talk about creating clients from contacts. Now, in version 16, we had a major change where contacts are also clients now. It used to be, prior to version 16, that you could have a contact and you could have a client, and they would be two separate things. If you took a contact that was not a client yet and wanted to make them into a client, you'd have to go add them as a client. You'd have to retype their address, phone number, email address, all that information separately into the client file. As most of you know, in version 16 that changed, and the contact file is now the basis for how you set up a client. So you'll notice that instead of typing this information here, you actually go to the contact tab, if you will, and that's where the information lives from Michael Larson. And if I were to change it here, it would change for all the cases he's tied to, and that's very cool. But what some people don't know still is that if we're in, let's say, PracticeMaster, and we're in the contact screen, and we've got this contact, David Cross, and we go and we want to make a client out of him, we could simply click on this. Over in the Quick Clicks, we now have a Create Client item that we can click in from a contact record and instantly create a client for that specific contact. So it used to be that they were totally separate, and when you had a contact that you wanted to turn into a client, you had to add a client record and then type everything in from scratch. When version 16 came in, a lot of people are still going in this way. They're going into the client screen instead of the contact screen. They're going to the client screen and clicking New, and then Next ID, and then from there they're going in and typing Cross and hopefully getting the right person. But in fact, what you can do is straight from the contact screen where you've got that person, click Create Client, choose the next available client ID, click OK, and bam, there it is. Very quick, very easy way to take a contact that was a prospect before, somebody that you've known before, but somebody that's not been a client before, and automatically and instantly turn them into a client. Mary Jo?
Okay, I'm going to go back to Tabs. And again, on the billing track here, I am going to talk about Prebuilt Tracking. A lot of you go in when you're preparing your statements, you generate your statements for your pre-bills, you make them draft statements, print them out, distribute them to the attorneys, you get them back, you make your corrections, you come back in, and some of you are still going to generate statements and regenerating and picking and choosing which ones that you need to run final bills for, either by doing a range or doing multiples and trying to get those done, or doing them for, you know, if they're all ready to go, that's great. But if they're not, what if you have a couple that come back and they need to be held, or there's some that you just aren't ready to quite send yet, or you get part of a one of your attorney's pre-bills back and not the whole stack, and you know, so what we have is pre-bill tracking. And so whenever you create a draft statement, as soon as you create a draft statement, they are loaded here in pre-bill tracking. So every single matter will have a pre-bill already in here with the date that you ran those pre-bills on. And that will be whatever the statement date is that you put in there. So when you get those pre-bills back, you can go through your stack of whichever ones you got through. You can sort this list by attorney. So if you go to your options, you can actually say, I want to do primary attorney 1 through 1 and just see theirs on the list, or 2 to 2, or whatever you're doing. Or you can see everybody. You can go through here, and if you want to send a final bill, you can just double-click. That puts a little check mark in the R column. Or you can just click on Reviewed, and that will put a check mark there. You can do a range, so I can hit Shift and do a group of them, or I can hit Control and do one at a time and do whichever ones I'm ready to actually run finals for. And as long as I have a reviewed check mark in that column and I click Final Statements, it will run a final bill for them. If I have a bill that I want to hold, it's a contingent case, an estate case, whatever, I can come in and I can highlight that particular record and I can click Hold. It will put 2 check marks. I reviewed it, but I'm going to hold it. And if I hit Final Statements, it will run Final Statements for everything that has a check mark in just the reviewed. But if it sees any that has a check mark in the hold column or nothing checked, it will not run a final bill for them. So it's a way to manage your list. There's also a way to print this report. So what I like to do is actually print this report after I ran my drafts. I would come in and print it for that attorney so I knew exactly how many pre-bills I gave them, and I should have that many back. And I would give them a copy of the report, and I would have a copy of the report. And that way, if they tell me, you know, they didn't get it or whatever, I could go track it down under the pile of whatever's on their desk and get it to go ahead and finish my pre-bills. Once you do this and you hit Final Statements, it takes you right into the Generate Statements window minus the Client Selection tab. And that's because you've already selected which ones that you're going to run the bills for. You then go in and put your ending dates for what you want to run through your parameters, just like you did when you were running your drafts. Go to the options. It will already be final. It defaults to that once you set Final Statements. Put in your statement date and say OK. And then choose your printer and go ahead. I'll just preview these, and it's going to run my final bills. So you print those off. When you come back into Prebuilt Tracking, you will notice, maybe, you'll notice that now I have a date in the final column. So this is the date I actually ran the finals, and you'll see that there is no date in the hold column. When I update statements, these will fall off my list, and the only thing that's left is the holds, and then I can clear my list for the next billing cycle. So it makes billing much faster, much easier, and I'll turn it back to Paul.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the time when you're in PracticeMaster and you've got a client up on the screen, and oops, this is a brand new client from my last example. We're going to go to who's a good client, Michael Larson. We always pick on Michael Larson. And maybe you've got an email that's been journaled to them, or a note, or a calendar item. And you'll notice that when you go into that record, you don't have access to the client ID because you've already taken this note for that client, and that's where they belong. But what if you journal something to the wrong person, or you set up a calendar record for the wrong matter, and you want to, right from this screen, change it? It used to be you had to go someplace else, find the record. It was kind of cumbersome. You'd have trouble finding the right record, and then you could change it because this particular view is going to have that client ID grayed out. Maybe this really belongs on Kelly White's divorce case. Well, now we have the ability to change the client ID for emails, documents, fees, costs, notes, and calendar items right from this screen. So you can find the wrong one, or you can find the client where it's been put in the wrong place, find the record that's been put on that incorrect client, and simply say change client ID. And it says, well, who do you want to change it to? I think I said Kelly White's, got to put her last name in. And it was her divorce matter that I wanted to move it to, so it's that one. Say OK, and bam, it's gone from here. And if we pull up Kelly White and her divorce matter, it is now over there. So that's a lifesaver right there. Incorrectly recorded, put on the wrong client, fee, cost, document management, email, note, calendar, all of those can be changed right from here. Pull up the wrong client, find the appropriate wrongly applied record, and just change the client ID right from there. Mary Jo?
Okay, I'm going to flip it back to billing, and we are going to go to a report that I really like. Sometimes you final bill and you have not updated statements, or you update some of the statements but not all of them, and then you go into that either client manager or you look at that client's, you try to reprint a statement, it doesn't let you because there's a final bill hanging out there, or that time didn't get moved to AR because it's still out there as a final bill and it has not been updated. Well, there is a pre-update statements report that will give you a list of all of the statements that you have run finals for but have not updated yet. And I have run those finals for the last demonstration I just did. So those are sitting out there and they have not been updated yet. So they will be on my list, and I'm just going to leave my parameters open, but there's several selections that you could do. And there's my 2 final bills that I ran, but they are not updated yet. As soon as I update them or unbill them, they'll come off the list. So this is a good report at the end of the month after billing is complete to make sure that none of those fell through the cracks and you did actually update all statements. Paul?
Well, this one, here you go. This one is new in version 16, and let's say that we pull up Michael Larson. Oops. Might be easier just to click on him. And we go over to calendar, and maybe it wasn't Michael we were doing this with before, but nonetheless we're going to change Robert. Robert's gone, or at least he's been taken off this case and he's been replaced by Pam. Now, we can go into each record and change Robert to Pam, or pull up the thing and uncheck Robert and do Pam instead and then save it. But what if we had, literally dozens of entries that had been assigned to Robert? Or maybe Robert's gone for good, and instead of pulling up just this matter from Michael Larson, we want to pull up the whole calendar file and change all the calendar items from Robert to Pam. There's a new feature called Find and Replace. It's over here in Quick Clicks. I can go in and I can say, I want to change Robert to Pam, and I want to do it for a specific field, and I'm going to clear all of them and just choose the user group field. I want to do it only for the current list. I don't want to do it for the highlighted records. I could have highlighted just a couple records I wanted to change. I want to do it for the whole current list, and this current list happens to be all the calendar items specifically for this case from Michael Larson. When I go and say replace all and say OK, bam, right there you can see that all the Roberts have been changed to Pam. Very easy. You get a lot of power here. You can use Control F like you would in Word or Chrome or any other program, but it's also right over here called Find and Replace. And by the way, it's not just replace like I explained. It's not just changing Robert to Pam or Jen to Joe or whatever. You can also find. So if you're looking for something specific in here, I could search all fields for a certain word or a certain field for a certain word. Very, very useful. Mary Jo?
Okay, I'm going to flip over to Accounts Payable. And a lot of times when you come in and you have a batch of checks that you have to print, you come in and you can print checks, and on the last screen it gives you an option to pick and choose the checks that you want to print, and you can do that. But what if you're just doing an invoice and you just want to quickly just print that one check? The attorney comes in and they need a check to go to court right now, and you don't want to have to do the invoice, go out and print checks and choose that one check and print it. We have, by double-clicking on the invoice that I want to print, I have this invoice in here, there is, my double clicker is not working here. Can you click that for me, Paul? Thank you. There is a quick print button up here. A lot of people don't know about that, but if you just click on that quick print, it will take me right out to the printer, and I can print that check right from the screen instead of having to go through all the other hoops. Paul?
Oh, before you go, Paul, I have a question on your previous tip.
Yes?
It is, and this is...
Who is this? What is it? Who is this, Mary Jo? Is this... Oh, this is Leanne. We didn't let Leanne talk last time. Welcome back, Leanne.
Thank you, Paul. Mary's question is it possible to change the person across all clients in the calendar at the same time?
Yes. In my example, I had Michael Larson's case up and the calendar tab, and so when I said to do that for this list, I was saying only the items that appear in this list for Michael Larson. But if instead I had been in the calendar file itself, which is a way to open the calendar file without regard for a certain client. You'll notice this list is very long compared to the other list of just a few entries for that one case. I could have done the same thing, and now when I said current list, I'd be using the list that I was in when I started this, which happens to be the entire calendar file, not just that calendar file from Michael Larson. Okay, now I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to talk about rate tables. In Tabs, we have the ability to set specific rates for a client using something called a fee rate table, which is a way to say, well, for this matter, Ron Anderson gets a rate of 120, and it's somebody else, we'll just do one more, but we would theoretically do all of them. Kendra gets 350, and so that's a rate that will be charged for this specific matter, this 100.00, which is a Larson versus Belcour matter for the client Michael Larson. But we also have the ability in a rate table to set it up to share another one. So I have created a custom rate table here under client 100.00, but I could then go into other tables and share these. So what that means is, yes, I want to save this. I could pull up other matters like this one for John Williams. Yep. And I could say, well, his fee rate table should be shared with Michael Larson. And it would automatically pull that in. And so what we give as a tip then is set up the master rate tables, the ones that you use most often. And perhaps you've got client 1 maybe set up as your administrative client. So you might set up rate table 1.10 being a primary rate table for timekeeper 1. And 1.11 might be another type of special rate arrangement that you have for timekeeper 1's clients, and 1.20 might be the primary rate table for timekeeper number 2. What scheme you use and how you do this isn't important, but the point is set up the most common rate tables under some administrative client, or maybe if you're doing insurance defense work, for instance, set up the primary rate table under the 00 matter for that client, and then you can apply that default rate table to hundreds, dozens, thousands of matters without having to re-enter those rates. And the thing about sharing a rate table then and doing it that way is that later on, if you change that rate and you want it to change among all matters and you've shared that table with those other matters, you just go into the primary rate table, the primary matter, and pull up the rate table, change the rates, and they're going to change for all the matters that are sharing that rate table. And Mary Jo's, you can also, and you can also share through client options, which is something that we're going to look at in a second. So I will keep this note in front of me, and when we talk about that, we'll talk about that. So set up your default rate tables and then share them with other clients rather than setting up an individual rate table for every specific matter. Makes it much easier to manage later on, much easier to change those rates. Mary Jo?
Okay, I'm going to flip it back to accounts payable, and I'm going to talk about the cash requirements report. This is a report that a lot of people don't know is out here. This helps you, if you're entering your invoices ahead of time, to be able to do this report and find out exactly what you have to pay each week or every 2 weeks or whenever you're paying your bill. So as soon as that bill comes in, it's an invoice you have to pay, enter it in with a certain due date. I always pick maybe the Thursday or the Friday before it was due, and put that in there as the due date. And then you have this report that you can choose what the due date is. So I'll say I want to see everything through 11/15 of 11. That's my default date and my test information here. And I say, okay, preview. It will give me a list. First, it will tell me my beginning bank balance, all the invoices that I have to pay that have that due date, and then what my ending balance will be after I pay them. And this is able to be turned on and off. You can show the beginning balance and ending balance, or you can turn it off and not show it and just have just what the total amount of the invoices are. So this will, it comes in handy when you want to know week to week how much you have to pay. This is a summary cash report. There is a detail as well, and you can choose either one, include what information that you want to see, and print that out, and you are all set. Paul?
Well, now I'm going to talk about that change client options thing. I'm going to go back into tabs here. So let's say that we set up all of our clients, and we've been doing this for a year or so, and we've always set up our, oh gosh, what's a good example here, Mary Jo? Our billing options. We have not assessed finance charge. We've never assessed finance charge, and all of a sudden we decide we're going to assess finance charge. Okay? Well, let's say that since the beginning of time in Tabs 3, we have set up 782 clients or matters, I should say, and 460 of them are still active. Well, that would mean that if we want to start charging finance charge, there's another place where we can go and make it so that every new matter defaults to charging a finance charge. But what about the ones that are already there? Do we have to go into each one and change that? No. Of course, you know the answer is going to be no, or I wouldn't have asked the question, right? There is a place out here under statement preparation called Change Client Options, and it allows us to go in and change any of these things for a range of clients. Now, the range of clients is usually everybody. Now, you'll notice they had that 0.00 in there. This is what I call the attorney protection mode. Let's say an attorney gets in here. Of course, we shouldn't be allowing those attorneys in here, but let's say he or she gets in here by mistake and changes all the clients to something they shouldn't be. This 0.0 that I got rid of simply says if it were to be run without taking that out, it wouldn't really change anything because it's saying 0 through 0 and it's not going to change anything. I take that out and I go, for instance, to assess finance charge. I have to get to the right screen and I have to select that option, and now I want it to be checked. And I also have to select the number of days. Well, first the rate. That didn't work. Hold on, there we go. I want to be 12%, and I also want the number of days to be, let's say, 15. And once I've selected this, only these three things that are not grayed out will be changed for this range of clients. But if I then go ahead and say, okay, I will change all my clients from not being charged finance charge to being charged finance charge after 15 days at 12%. And as you can see, if you scroll through here, you can change just about any of the options that you'd want to on a client screen. Now, one other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with this is, let's say we put in a new timekeeper, Bob. He's been in the system for a month, and we got his rate set up wrong so that all the hundreds of transactions that were entered for last month, the month that he started, are put in incorrectly at $250 an hour. It's supposed to be $240. You have the similar sort of thing called change whip transactions that allows you, again, here's the attorney safeguard. You have to take this off. Allows you to specify a certain client or a certain timekeeper, or, well, timekeeper would be specified over here. So if it's Bob, well, we'll see who 2 is. Whoever 2 is, we could change their transactions for all clients because we took that 00 out. And what we want to do is, maybe he got mistakenly set up as non-billable. Maybe his rate was wrong. Maybe it was mistakenly set up as $250 and needs to be $240. This will go through looking for all of client or timekeeper number 2's transactions for all clients that still haven't been billed. Notice this is change WIP, work in process transactions, and it will change those that it finds with a rate of $250 to $240. Very easy way to make some mass changes to your system. Mary Jo?
Okay, I'm going back to accounts payable. And so we're going to come over here and we are going to talk about changing vendors. Transferring invoices, a lot of times we'll come in and there will be duplicate vendors and someone will ask me, how can I just combine those or merge them or get rid of one of them? I don't need 2 or 3 of the same vendor out here. So what we have now is under the invoice tab, there's transfer invoices between vendors. So you have to decide which vendor do you want to keep and put that one in. So you're going to take the one that you don't want to keep and say from that timekeeper to this one. You can have all of the invoices. You can transfer any posted checks. You can decide if you want the paid and unpaid. In this case, I would want to do everything. And I want to leave my date range open, do my from and to, say OK. It will transfer all of that information to the vendor I want to keep. And then I can do that as many times as you need to. If you have 3 or 4 vendors that are the same and you need to combine them, move them all in there, and then go delete the ones that you don't want anymore. So that is possible to do that. Paul?
Okay. We're going to do what I call a fake reconciliation. You may want to know where you are right now. What's my bank balance, and what checks are still outstanding that make that bank balance have that situation. Go into GL. Go into reconciliation and choose your account. You're not really going to reconcile. You're just going to take and copy this beginning balance to the ending balance. You usually need to set today as the reconciliation date. Sometimes it'll automatically advance this, and so it may be in a period that's beyond. Just make sure this is today, and make sure the beginning and ending balance match. So you take your beginning balance, which is going to be correct, and kind of copy it in here. And what you get is the ability to look at all your outstanding checks. And you can get that in a real neat report just by going File, Print, and saying Outstanding for the entries that you want to see. And we'll preview it. And what it essentially does is gives you a report that shows you all your outstanding entries, and then gives you the breakdown of what your all the outstanding deposits also that have not been cleared, and gives you a breakdown of what your ending balance is in your account. And this nice list of all your outstanding checks that you've got there. It's a good way to get a quick and easy list of your outstanding checks, your deposits that haven't been reconciled, and more importantly, what your ending balance is, all in one report. Mary Jo?
Mary Jo?
Yes.
I have a question for you on your previous tip.
Okay.
What version is the change WIP transactions available in?
It's available in all of them.
All the versions?
Yes, that's not a new feature. That's been in there for a while.
Right, thank you.
And I would recommend, I don't know that Paul added this, but if you're ever doing changing WIP transactions or changing client options, I highly recommend you do the backup ahead of time just in case you change some things that you don't mean to change, because once that's changed, sometimes it's hard to change those back. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not, but if you did a mass change for all clients and you didn't mean it, you can go back to the backup. So,
and as an aside, make sure that you changed what you intended to right after you do the change. You don't want to discover this a month later and have to go back to that backup.
There's a verification list that you can print after both of those to double check that it did change the correct client. So make sure you print that and double check it. Something else when Paul did his, make sure that when you get done here that you hit the red X up here and cancel that reconciliation, because it's actually going to remember that you've started a reconciliation and you don't want that hanging out there. If somebody tries to advance a month later, it's going to give them an error and it won't let them do it. So just, you can do the fake one, just cancel it when you're done. And make sure that whoever does your reconciliation hasn't started one already and you go and clear it and wipe it out. So be careful with that too. So check. Mine is really quick for this next one. If you just want a down and dirty report, you want to know what's in all of your bank accounts and how much money you have right now as of today available balance, there's a bank account balance report right here on your main tab. You click that, preview it, and this is going to give you every single chart of account that you have listed as a bank account and what the current balance is in each, and then your total. So that's a fun, easy, fast bank balance report. Paul?
There was a time, a while ago, but there was a time when we didn't have something called a deposit slip in General Ledger. And so we still run into clients that have had the software for a long time but are on the current version who don't know this is here. So consider this. You get, and we'll keep it simple, but it's usually much higher quantity than this. Let's say you have 2 checks that you got in the mail today. You've made the payment entries, and you go ahead and you put them in the bank. Without combining them into a deposit slip, you won't see them as one item. You put 2 $100 checks in the bank, so when you get your bank statement, it's going to be a $200 deposit. You would have to know later to reconcile that that was a $100 check and another $100 check, and you need to reconcile both of those. Now, that means then that if you do use the deposit slip feature, you just come in here, start a new deposit slip. It'll default to today. It'll default to a deposit ID that kind of reflects today's date. You check the appropriate bank account, which it usually is defaulting to, and you select the receipts. So by doing this, I'm saying that I am depositing all 3 of these receipts today in one deposit, and therefore when I go to reconcile, it'll show up in my reconciliation as one entry for $20,225 instead of 3 entries for these 3 individual amounts. Now, I know a lot of people that have been using the software for just a short period, or even some that have been using it for a long time know this, but if you don't, and you start using this instead of doing it the way you've been doing, we were doing it 10, 15, 20 years ago, this is going to make a significant time savings in your reconciliation. Mary Jo?
I'm going to go on to trust. We wanted to have a tip in trust here for you. So a lot of times if you're integrating with Tabs and you want to pay yourself to the firm, you're writing out a check and then you're going over and you're taking it and making a deposit and then you're entering a payment over under Tabs so that you can credit that client. But if you're integrating and you turn the integration on, we have a way that you can actually just pay the firm right from trust and have it go ahead and automatically enter that payment in Tabs. And then all you have to do is cut your check and take it to the bank and do the deposit. So it takes out one of those steps. And to do that, when you're in trust transactions and you're making out your check, you go ahead and just put in whatever the amount of your check is that you're paying the firm. But when you get down here to the payee name, you're going to just type the word firm. You're going to set up a payee that is just firm with your name and address of your, with your address of the firm. And if you save that payee, you can create it here. You can add the payee, or you can go over and under setup, you can create a payee called firm with this address. This tells the system that, oh, this is going to go to Tabs. This is a Tabs payment. And once you've typed firm, this Tabs 3 button becomes available for you to click on to verify that, yes, I'm going to use, you can set up these different payment codes if you use separate, but usually we have just a general regular payment, and we let Tabs sort it out when it gets there. But it's going to say, do you want that full $1,000 over here? Yes. So we go ahead and just verify it. We save it, and we can print our check and go do it. When I save this, and I'll go ahead and do that, when I go over to Tabs, we will have a payment. Let me get into it. I'm going to go use my client manager, and I'm going to put in 121.01. And now I will have, of course, it's probably going to have a different date. My dates might be set incorrectly. I should have checked that ahead of time. But we want to make sure that our dates are proper for our check in our system. But it would actually have the payment sitting over here of $1,000. So it would be automatic, and it would come over into Tabs. I don't have to enter that a separate time, and we are all set with that. Paul?
And for those of you who are keeping score at home, this is number 16. We kind of alluded to this just a minute ago. On every main tab in APGL, Trust, Tabs 3, and PracticeMaster, you have these little icons down here, or a little radio button for Run and Customize. If you go into Customize, it puts you in a mode where you can change what's appearing there. I just changed that from the Client and Activity Report to Client Labels. I go to Run, I save it, and now every time I come in, my main tab is going to have labels down here. That's because I, as an individual, am much more interested in client labels than whatever was there before. So you get these icons on your main tab lined up with the things you use most often, and then you really don't have to spend much time in these other tabs because most everything that you want is over here. An added feature or function in PracticeMaster is that whatever you have on your main tab also appears up here in this button bar in that exact same order. So we have Client here and here, Matter Manager here and here, Contact here and here, and so forth. The reason that's significant is because later when you're in the client screen and then want to go to the contact file, and then from there want to go to the daily calendar, you can do so just by clicking on these buttons up here, which you have customized to include, just like the main tab in PracticeMaster, the programs or the functions that you use most often. Now, Leanne, any more questions?
There are no more questions.
Thank you, Leanne. I bought a phone system a month and a half ago, and I bought the wrong kind, and when we went to have our user group meeting, Leanne couldn't talk. So we're glad to have Leanne talking again because it's much more pleasant than yelling across the room. So if you do think of something, or if you're just even more shy than one who would type the question or raise your hand and you just want to ask it in private, just email us. It's either maryjo.boyd, I almost said Blum, she's been married almost, what, a year and a half now? maryjo.boyd, maryjo.boyd, or paul.purdue, like the school, not the chicken, P-U-R-D-U-E, paul.purdue, at attorneycomputersystems.com. So send us your questions. We'll be happy to answer them. Next month, we are talking about workflows. It's a new feature in PracticeMaster. It's extremely powerful to do some very specific things automatically in the software based on certain things happening. We're going to delve into them a little deeper than we ever have in the past in the virtual user group meetings in the water cooler, and kind of spend the whole half hour going over how they operate, what they can do, how they are triggered, and how to get started thinking about what you could do with a workflow. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a good afternoon, a good Christmas, holiday, New Year, all those things. We'll see you in 2013. Bye-bye.